My parents kicked me out at 18 because I wasn't man enough. Now they beg for help while I live a life they'll never know. I'm a 26-year-old guy, and I've always been the disappointment of the family. Not because I did anything terrible, not drugs, not crime. Just because I wasn't them. I wasn't loud. I didn't like sports. I didn't yell over people at the dinner table to prove my point. I liked to read. I liked to draw. I cried during movies. And for that, my dad labeled me soft before I even hit puberty. "You gonna cry again, princess?" He'd sneer if I got quiet during one of his lectures. My older brothers would laugh along like it was a sport, mocking me for my girly voice or the way I held a pen. And when I stood up for myself even a little, he'd say, "This world eats men like you alive." My mom was complicated. In the shadows of my father's temper, she would sneak into my room after he was done yelling and whisper, "Don't listen to him. You're special, sweetheart." But in the daylight, when he was around, she became mute, silent during his rants, still as a statue while he crushed me with his words. It messed with my head. Was I loved? Was I hated? Was I being protected or pitied? I remember once at 8 years old, I won a school art contest. First place. I ran home so proud, clutching my drawing like a trophy. My dad glanced at it for 2 seconds and said, "What am I supposed to do with that? Frame it in my garage next to the wrenches?" That was the first time I didn't cry. I just folded the paper and stuffed it in a drawer. That's where most of me ended up, quiet, hidden, folded away, and I think that's the moment I stopped expecting love from them. I was 13 the first time I realized they didn't just misunderstand me, they were actually afraid of me. Or maybe ashamed. I'm still not sure which is worse. It started on a random Thursday. I was homesick from school, lying on the couch half asleep when I heard my parents talking in the kitchen. I don't think they knew I was there. My mom's voice was low, worried. My dad's was sharp, irritated. I couldn't hear every word, but one sentence burned itself into my brain like acid. "He acts like a girl, Susan. I swear to God, if he turns out the way I think he will..." I froze. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. My stomach twisted itself into a hard, heavy knot. Later that night, when they went out to get groceries, I wandered into their bedroom. I don't even know what I was looking for. Maybe proof that I was being paranoid. Maybe some secret stash of kindness they hid from me. Instead, I found the note. It was folded and tucked into one of Mom's old jewelry boxes, scribbled on the back of a grocery list in her cursive handwriting. It said, "I'm worried about my name. He's so soft, so emotional. If Dad ever suspected he might be different, I don't know what he'd do." That word, different, hit harder than if she'd just written gay. Like she couldn't even say it out loud. Like it was some kind of disease she was too afraid to name. I sat on the edge of their bed holding that note like it might catch fire in my hands. I didn't cry, not then. I just folded it back up, put it exactly where I found it, and left their room like a ghost. From that moment on, I stopped speaking unless spoken to, and I made damn sure no one ever saw the real me again. By the time I was 15, my life had become a series of silent endurance tests, proofs of manhood as my father saw them. And every single one felt like a punishment for simply existing the way I was. First, he forced me into boxing. "You need to toughen up," he said, tossing a pair of gloves at me like they were handcuffs. I hated everything about it, the smell of sweat, the sting of impact, the roar of men cheering for someone to get hurt. During my second match, I took a hit to the face and dropped to one knee. It wasn't the pain that made me cry, it was the humiliation. My father stood at the edge of the ring and shouted, "Get up! Don't you dare embarrass me like that!" When I didn't, he walked out, didn't even look back. After that came the job at the construction site. One of his buddies needed extra hands, and apparently I wasn't doing anything useful with my summer. I spent 3 weeks lifting heavy things I didn't understand, surrounded by men who mocked me for not knowing how to hold a power drill. I faked an ankle sprain just to get out of it. My father called me a quitter and told my brothers, "He'll never be one of us." They made sure I didn't forget it. At home, I found scraps of peace in secret places. I'd write poems in the back of my school notebooks, sketch quietly in my closet with a flashlight. But the day my father found my notebook, filled with messy stanzas and soft words, I watched him tear it in half without even reading a single line. "You think this is what men do?" he said. "This isn't art, this is weakness on paper." That night I stopped writing, and I started pretending, Every moment, every word, every breath. I didn't expect a celebration, but I guess I hoped for something. High school graduation came and went like a silent funeral. No photos, no dinner. No, we're proud of you. Just me in a wrinkled cap and gown, walking across a stage for a family that didn't show up. When I got home, the house was quiet, except for the TV blaring from the living room. My dad didn't even look away from the screen. Later that night, he called me into the garage. I still remember the smell of gasoline and old paint. He didn't waste time. "You're 18 now," he said, lighting a cigarette with one hand while oiling a wrench with the other. "Time to start acting like a man. Either you get a real job, start pulling your weight, or you get out." I blinked, unsure if he was serious. "Dad, I'm not going to keep feeding a boy who hides in notebooks and cries when someone raises their voice." My mom stood in the kitchen doorway behind him. I locked eyes with her, hoping for a lifeline. She looked down and whispered, "It might be good for you to grow up." That night, a black trash bag appeared on my bed. My clothes, a few books, and nothing else. No hug, no goodbye. Just the sound of my father locking the front door after I left. I slept on a park bench that first night. My phone was at 12%, my bank account had $18, and I had no idea what the hell I was supposed to do next. But part of me was weirdly calm, because at least now, I didn't have to pretend I was okay in that house anymore. The first few weeks out of the house were brutal. Brutal in a way I couldn't have imagined until I lived it. I bounced between couches of distant cousins, friends' older siblings, anyone who would let me crash for a night. Most nights it was a park bench or the floor of a grimy apartment. My stomach ached constantly, and not from hunger alone. The ache was humiliation, rejection, and the constant gnawing fear that I was failing at life. I worked whatever I could find, dishwashing at a diner, cleaning floors at a convenience store, stocking shelves at a grocery store. Each paycheck was barely enough to cover bus fare and a cheap can of soup. I learned to eat instant noodles in the dark, alone, slurping quietly so no one would hear my shame. I learned to sleep in parks, to shower at gyms, to pretend I belonged somewhere even when I didn't. One night, I got sick. Fever spiking, teeth chattering, barely able to keep my eyes open. I had no insurance, no family to call, no one who would care. I curled up under a thin blanket in a stranger's hallway and thought maybe they had been right all along. Maybe I wasn't strong enough to survive. I remember staring at the ceiling and whispering to myself, "This is it. I'll never get out. I'll never be anything." And just as the thought sank in, I heard laughter and music from the apartment above. Normal life was happening somewhere, just not for me. That's when I realized I wasn't just hungry. I was invisible. And maybe, just maybe, I was going to stay that way forever. But even in that cold, humiliating moment, a tiny, stubborn spark inside me refused to die. It whispered, "Not yet. Not over. You're not done." It's strange how one small act can flip the direction of an entire life. For me, it happened at a bus stop on a gray afternoon, when I was shivering under a hoodie that smelled like bleach and rain. I was 20 and felt about 80. Then I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. "Is that really you?" It was Ms. Carson, my high school English teacher. The one who used to write little notes on my essays like, "Your words have weight. Don't forget that." I froze, embarrassed for her to see what I'd become. My shoes were falling apart. My backpack was ripped. I looked like a ghost of the kid she used to believe in. We talked awkwardly for a few minutes. When she asked where I was living, I couldn't lie. I told her everything. The eviction, the jobs, the noodles. She didn't flinch, just frowned softly, like she'd already known something was wrong years ago. "Come by the community college," she said. "We'll figure something out. I still have friends there." Part of me wanted to laugh. What could a tired, broke ex-student possibly figure out? But she wasn't offering pity. She was offering direction. A week later, she helped me fill out scholarship forms, wrote a glowing recommendation letter, and found me a work-study job at the campus bookstore. For the first time in years, someone looked at me and saw more than failure. The first paycheck I got from that bookstore wasn't much, but I stared at it for hours. It felt like proof that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't broken beyond repair. And in the quiet of that little dorm room I rented with scholarship money, I picked up a pen again. I had started to believe maybe life was quietly improving. Little by little, when the universe decided to shock me, I was helping out at the bookstore, Sorting old orders when the manager asked me to check the junk email folder for a customer receipt. I groaned. Why does anything important ever end up in junk? As I scrolled, my eyes caught something, an email from a literary magazine I had submitted to months ago. My heart stopped. It was unopened. 6 weeks old. And the subject line read, "We want to feature your work." I stared at it for a long time. Part of me thought it was a mistake. Part of me didn't even remember what I had sent. But I clicked it. Every word was praise. Your poem struck a chord. We'd be honored to publish it. I felt a jolt of disbelief. Something inside me, buried under years of shame and rejection, jumped to life. The next few days were a blur of emails, submissions, and edits. And then it happened. My work went live online. A stranger shared it on Twitter. Then another. Soon hundreds of people were reading it. Hundreds were commenting. They were moved. They were responding. For the first time, people were recognizing me, not the soft, weak, useless kid my family called me, but me. My words mattered. My voice mattered. I remember leaning against the wall in my tiny apartment, hands shaking, thinking, if they could see me now. But even as the thrill surged through me, there was a creeping tension in my chest. Recognition felt good, but it also reminded me of what I had lost, of who had told me I'd never be enough. And deep down, I knew I wasn't done proving it. Not to them, not to the world, and certainly not to myself. I closed my laptop and stared at the ceiling. This was only the beginning. By the time I hit 22, I'd learned 2 things. 1, I could survive without them. And 2, I didn't owe them a single shred of my life. The first step was symbolic, but it felt like shedding chains. I legally changed my last name. Not because I hated my family, though I did, but because I finally owned who I was. My old surname carried all their judgments, all their shame, all their whispered insults from years past. My new name? Freedom, identity, something no one could taint. I moved into a small apartment with other young artists. It wasn't much, just 4 walls, a sagging couch, and a desk by the window where the sun barely reached, but it was mine. My space, my rules. No one told me to be louder, tougher, or more of a man. No one mocked my hands for holding a pen instead of a hammer. I started writing again. Real writing. Poetry, short stories, little essays that no one was paying attention to yet, but I didn't care. I didn't have to. Every line I wrote felt like reclaiming myself, piece by piece. Even my friends noticed a change. I was calmer, sharper, quieter in the way that comes from someone who survived being unseen for too long. I didn't broadcast it. I didn't need their validation. For the first time, I was building a life for me. But just as I settled into this fragile new piece, a message popped up on my phone. An old cousin. Out of nowhere. Simple words. Dad's asking about you. He saw your poem in the paper. A chill ran down my spine. They were starting to notice. I thought I was invisible. I thought changing my name, moving cities, and cutting contact meant I could finally disappear. But I was wrong. It started with a message from my younger cousin. Hey, just so you know, Dad's been asking about you. He saw your poem in the paper. My stomach dropped. My hands shook as I scrolled through the text. I didn't reply. I didn't even breathe. For the first time in years, I felt hunted. A week later, another message. This one from my mother. We're proud of you. Come visit. We miss you. My first instinct was to delete it. My second instinct was to burn the phone. But I froze. Something about the words, proud and miss, stung deeper than anything else. I hadn't realized how long I'd been holding on to anger. How long I'd been imagining what I would say if I ever faced them. How many nights I'd rehearsed, standing up to my father, confronting my mother. And now the reality was here, poking at the cracks in my carefully built life. I spent hours pacing my apartment, staring at the ceiling, imagining what it would be like to go back. To step into that house where every memory was a wound. Every laugh, every dinner, every insult that had shaped me into someone they could never understand. Finally, I put the phone down. I didn't respond. I didn't block them either. I just let it sit. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that I had a choice, not to run, not to hide, not to fight, but to decide if they even mattered anymore. But as I turned off the light that night, a knot formed in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last I'd hear from them. It came out of nowhere. My phone rang, and the name on the screen made my chest tighten. My oldest brother. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. Hello? My voice sounded small, hesitant. Dad's sick, he said, voice low. Really sick. He might not make it. I froze. My mind spun. Part of me wanted to hang up, to pretend I hadn't heard. Part of me felt something I hadn't felt in years, an almost unbearable tug to see him, to face the man who had made my childhood a prison. You want me to come? I asked cautiously. Yes. Mom wants you there too. She said it's important. I sat on the edge of my bed, silent, my thoughts colliding. I hadn't seen them in 6 years. 6 years of quiet, of survival, of building a life they never acknowledged. Did I want closure, or was I walking into a trap? I called my therapist. Her voice was calm, steady. You can go, she said. But go for yourself, not for them. You're not obligated to heal their guilt. You can stand tall without their approval. Her words settled a little of the storm inside me. I booked the plane ticket that evening, my stomach heavy with dread and anticipation. Part of me wanted confrontation. Part of me just wanted to see the truth for myself. By the time the plane touched down, I knew one thing. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't pretend to be someone I wasn't anymore, and as I grabbed my bag and stepped off the plane, a cold certainty settled in my chest. This would change everything. Stepping back into that house was like walking into a museum of my own past. The smell of old carpet mixed with faint cologne my father always wore. The walls, the furniture, even the sunlight slanting through the curtains. It was all the same, yet smaller somehow, suffocating in a way I hadn't noticed as a kid. My mother met me at the door. She looked older, thinner, her eyes red-rimmed. You came, she whispered. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. My father sat in his recliner, frail, hooked up to some machines I didn't recognize. He barely looked at me, but when he did, I saw the faint flicker of recognition, or maybe fear. You still write those sissy poems? He croaked, voice weak but sharp. Yes, I said simply. And they paid for my plane ticket. The room went silent. My brothers shifted uneasily on the couch, unsure whether to laugh, intervene, or shrink away. I could feel the tension radiating off them like heat. I walked slowly through the living room, taking in every detail I'd tried to forget. The family photos, the trophies I never earned, the smells of meals I was never allowed to help cook. It was all mine once in a twisted sense, and yet it wasn't. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't trembling or shrinking. I was a visitor in my own past, armed with a life they couldn't touch, a voice they couldn't silence, and a story they had ignored for far too long. And even as I stood there, silent, watching them adjust to my presence, I knew something had shifted. The balance of power had changed, but I wasn't done yet. I found myself alone with him in the kitchen. The machines hummed softly, filling the room with a rhythm that matched the nervous pounding of my heart. I could see the frailty in his hands, the thin lines on his face, but none of that softened the years of pain he'd caused me. I took a deep breath. I need to say this, I began. All those years you told me I was weak, that I was soft, that I'd never make it. I survived anyway. I made a life without you. I made a life because you tried to break me. He didn't respond. His eyes closed for a moment, as if shielding himself from the weight of my words. I pressed on. I didn't need your approval. I didn't need your validation. I needed honesty, love, things you never gave me, and I'm finally free of it. For the first time, I wasn't pleading. I wasn't trying to convince him. I was simply stating a truth they had ignored for years. My mother had tears streaming silently down her face, and my brothers looked away, uncomfortable and small. I straightened up and paused, letting the silence stretch. The air was heavy, electric, as if the room itself was acknowledging the shift. I didn't expect him to apologize. I didn't need him to. My words were enough. Finally, I turned and walked toward the door. I hugged my mother briefly, whispering, I love you, but this is mine now. She nodded, choking back sobs. I didn't look back at my father or my brothers. I stepped outside, feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I understood what freedom felt like. Not the absence of pain, but the reclaiming of power, the ownership of my own life. And as I closed the door behind me, I knew nothing could take it away again. When I got back home, I wrote like a man possessed. The words poured out of me as if I'd been holding them hostage for years, and maybe I had. I titled the piece, Trash Bag Son. It wasn't just a poem. It was my entire life on paper. The humiliation, the rejection, the years of being told I'd never be enough. I posted it online without overthinking, without expecting anything. By morning, my phone was blowing up. Thousands of likes. Thousands of comments. People from around the world wrote things like, "This is my story too," and "You just put my pain into words." I sat there reading comment after comment, realizing for the first time that I wasn't alone. News outlets picked it up. Podcasts quoted it. Someone even emailed me asking to feature it in a collection about resilience. My old teacher, Ms. Carson, called me crying. "I told you your words mattered," she said. And for once, I believed her. Soon, the poem turned into a series, then a book, then an invitation to speak at a youth conference. I stood on stage in front of hundreds of people, sharing pieces of myself I once buried in shame. When I finished, the room was silent until the applause hit. But what meant more than the applause was the realization that I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I wasn't writing for them. My father, my brothers, even my mother. I was writing for the kids who still sat in dark rooms, wondering if softness was a flaw. Success wasn't revenge. It was rescue. And in that moment, standing under those bright lights, I knew I had finally rescued myself. 2 years later, the past came knocking again. It was a simple message on my phone. My mother. "We're struggling. Can you help with the mortgage? You're the only one doing well." My hands froze. My stomach twisted. I had built a life of independence, a life where I could breathe without guilt, without judgment. And now they wanted a hand, after everything. I stared at the screen, memories flashing, trash bags, insults, nights alone, endless noodles, all the ways they told me I wasn't enough. I could almost hear my father's voice, sharp and cold. "You'll never make it in the real world," I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, but instead I thought carefully. Not out of kindness, but out of clarity. I typed slowly, deliberately. "You told me I wasn't a real man. I became one without you. Good luck." I hit send and blocked them all immediately. No explanations, no lectures, no begging for forgiveness. Just silence, freedom. Sitting in my apartment, the quiet was deafening, but in a good way. The weight of obligation, the chains of past guilt, they were gone. I didn't need to rescue them. I didn't need to answer their calls for help. I had survived. I had thrived, and for the first time in decades, I felt fully untouchable. Yet even as I sat there, a strange satisfaction simmered beneath the surface, not revenge in the petty sense, but the cold, undeniable truth. They came to me too late. They were the ones left scrambling in the life I'd already built, and I didn't look back. These days, I wake up in a space I built entirely for myself. My apartment is messy, lived in, full of books, art supplies, and the faint smell of coffee. I write every morning, sometimes for hours, sometimes for only a few lines, but it's my time, uninterrupted, unjudged. I mentor young writers now, kids who feel like the world is against them, who think being soft or sensitive is a flaw. I tell them, your voice matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. They look at me wide-eyed like I'm proof that survival isn't just possible, it can be beautiful. I walk past mirrors without shame. I walk down streets without fear. I've learned to love the person I once hid. The boy they threw away, the one who cried quietly in his room, who ate cheap noodles in silence, is long gone. In his place stands someone whole, strong, unapologetic, and alive. I don't contact my family. I don't need their approval, their apologies, or their gratitude. My life is mine entirely, built on the pieces I salvaged from my own pain. I've discovered something incredible. Freedom doesn't always mean moving on. Sometimes it means never looking back, and every night, when the city hums outside my window, I feel it, this quiet, steady pulse of survival, of self-respect, of someone finally becoming who they were always meant to be. I am enough. I found the old note from my mom one last time, the one that had started it all. Tucked away in a drawer, yellowed and fragile, I held it gently, almost afraid it might crumble in my hands. The words I'd read as a child, the fear and shame they carried, had haunted me for years. But now they felt distant like echoes from someone else's life. I sat down at my desk and wrote a response I would never send. Dear Mom, you were wrong. I didn't need fixing. I needed love. I became the man you never believed I could be, not because of you, but despite you. I folded it carefully and placed it into my journal. I didn't need validation, I didn't need acknowledgement. It was for me, a ritual of closure. I looked around my apartment, the messy art supplies, the shelves of books, the glow of my laptop still open with emails from students I mentor, from strangers inspired by my writing. This was the life I built, full and unshakable. Every failure, every insult, every night spent on a park bench had brought me here. For a moment, I imagined them reading that letter, realizing too late the life they had abandoned. A strange satisfaction rippled through me, not malice, but truth. They had lost the son they could never understand, the man they could never recognize. I closed my journal and exhaled, letting years of tension flow out with my breath. The past had been acknowledged, the pain honored, but I no longer carried it. I stepped to the window and watched the city lights flicker, alive and indifferent. And in that quiet, I finally understood. They would never know this life, and I didn't need them to. The boy they threw away had grown into a man who would never be broken again. I smiled, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely free.